Hello everybody, welcome. So grateful to have you all with me, and I want to make a shout out to one of my supporters, Cameron. So grateful for your support, your interest, your enthusiasm. So it is the evening. The moon is waning. We had bizarre media circuses around blue supermoons and so on. And the funny thing about this is I remember none of that from my childhood. There was no such thing as a supermoon. Frankly, I'm not even clear what the definition refers to. That's on me. But I have been watching the moon and the sky at night, and it's incredible. If there's anything that just overtly gives the lie to the incredible poverty of human knowledge, it's the night sky. We have no idea what that is. And we have models and toys about it. Most of them are mechanical. The one thing you'd never want is to have a mechanical map of your origin, of your family, of your loved ones. Now, there are exceptions. Under certain medical and sometimes psychological situations, a mechanical map can be life-saving and can enable us to change time so that death doesn't come now, it comes later. And you'll notice that most of our technologies change time. But the night sky asks us questions that the modern people have long been too timid to pursue. I was listening to Eric Weinstein, who I must admit I'm a fan of. Doesn't mean I sign up for the whole menu, right? This is one of his phrases. You go into a restaurant and meeting with any kind of prodigy or a person who's having insight, who can bring us to insight. You don't have to sign up for the whole menu. You don't go into the restaurant and say, I'll have everything. Right? And it's the same with me. You don't have to agree with me. We're not actually here to determine whether we agree or not. I would hope that what we're here for together right now is the possibility of seeing better. And there's so many astonishing little toys we can use to remember what it's like to experience actual insight. That, aha, finally, I see moment where everything we've ever thought before is suddenly transformed. And I would argue that our minds are born and made to ride waves of that kind of insight. But we're trapped in a very peculiar situation. And it's a situation we can gain insight into together whenever we agree that this is our mission. Yeah. And, you know, it's not as dangerous as a war mission, but the way the humans treat it, you'd think it was radioactive. Our people, and again, we have to think of people as a topology. There are mountains of insight and prodigy and wonder and memory. And there's large valleys of you and me and the common people. And each one of us is a mountain in a topology too. So I'm not saying all the people are a certain way. What I'm saying is the institutional stories that we're told about the most basic features of our experience, consciousness, organisms, time-space, light, the universe, stars, planets, galaxies, nebula, quasars, pulsars, black holes, white holes, dark matter, dark energy, electrons, photons, neutrons, quarks. The stories we are told about these phenomena, and particularly the stuff we encounter directly, space, time, light, organisms. Right? The institutional stories of, quote, what those things are so wrong that if you merely entertain them, your capacity for insight collapses. It just goes away. Right? It's like trying to get a drink of water in the middle of a house fire. It's not there. It ain't happening. If you get the fundamental basics so reductively, mechanistically, explicitly wrong, if you make those first moves so badly that it becomes impossible to make further useful moves, or nearly so, then you're modern. And none of the people want to be blind this way. If we could come to them and show them somehow in a way they can experience and understand that the actual nature of phenomena is nothing like our human stories. It does not resemble them. When we look to the skies in the day or the night, because we see different universes in the day and the night, the skies are alive with not just questions and clues, but cues, urgings, missions, memories. But they don't fit into representational cognition as we moderns practice it. They are from outside that whole system. That system is a very strange sub-process running in time-space, in human minds, and networks of them. Our thoughts, whatever they might be, they are surely not what's going on. The tree is not a tree. The mouse is not a mouse. Its actual identity is so profound that if we could but glimpse a few features of it, our knowledge would be reborn. Our capacity for insight would return to us. And our potentials for the most of us that isn't human. Now it's funny, when I began this recording, I had, somewhat like a comedian, right? I had a riff. And the riff orbited the idea of the most dangerous question. What's the most dangerous question we could ask? And in a way, all the dangerous questions, much of their primary danger is, if we even ask the questions, it will change everything we've ever thought we knew. And if we encounter a question like that, we're faced with the same problem that humans are faced with, if, as a species, in general, if non-human intelligences from time, space, or the sky, or beyond, are in contact with us. We're facing the same problem. What's the problem? The problem is 8,000 years of highly invested insanity, ignorance, slavery, torture, prisoneering, obliteration of the ecologies. We're so deeply invested in all of those behaviors as a species that anything that would powerfully draw that into question should be off the table. And we have the same problem as individuals when we face really exciting questions, because they threaten our entire thought history. And so one could, rather than turning forward into the liberation that the question is posing, and this I would recommend we almost always do, but rather than turning forward like Lot in the Bible story of his wife as they're leaving, I believe it's Sodom, and Sodom is being destroyed by something from the sky. She looks back and turns to stone. And there's a parable there, and the parable is that when faced with actual insight, if we turn around and become worried about our previous actions, thoughts, adventures, mistakes, addiction, so forth, whatever, if we turn around and become very concerned with what is now behind us in the face of the shining insight of this dangerous question, then we're trapped. We will reject the question. We will stay with the old habits. We will be frozen, in a sense, in our own past. The most dangerous questions. So the sky is actually calling us. Right? It's better than if you were getting a personal phone call from the sky. It's made... So now I have to be careful because I will encounter my own snare if I'm not careful, the snare of explicit identity. When we think about insight, what we will find is if we have a way to experience insight regularly, right? And hopefully, perhaps some of you listeners have had an experience or two of insight during, reading my work or listening to these recordings. And I absolutely honor and celebrate that. It's what I'm here for. I'm trying to see better. And that's not a very dangerous thing, right? That doesn't necessarily lead to war or aggression or anything. To get people on a mission to see better together, that's a pretty safe mission. Right? It's safer than most of the missions we sign up for, by far. So I just want to ring this little bell of, it's possible for us to get together and try to remember our origins, our natures, our potentials, our intelligences, our unique personal and communal skills, abilities, potentials that can be developed that are otherwise invisible to us. And this is supposed to be the mission of our governments, and it's supposed to be the mission of religion. I'm not saying no parts of those work. Some of them do work, some parts of some things. Some of them are pretty amazing. Advaita Vedanta is one, easy-to-hand example of something that actually is intelligent and goes after insight and really lives up to these questions. Where do we originate? What is life, birth, death, dreaming? What are bodies? All these questions. What are organisms? Why is there something like the strange continuous world of our waking world experience? Why is that opposed to the insightfully ambiguous.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. Have a good walk, huh?
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
The insightfully ambiguous or re-ambiguating intelligences of our dreaming mind. Which isn't to, slight the waking mind. It's just really, really a dangerous thing when it defects from its own origins in what I might call non-ordinary intelligence. And I think we're made of that. But insight isn't concerned with the facts. It's not going to just slap a frame on something, do a couple reductive, throwaways, excisions, excerptions. Oh, well, we'll just look at this quality. The tree's made of wood. Well, okay. But which feature of the tree's composition has more precedence? Wood or time-space? The tree's made of time-space. Right? And, the humans are unlikely to go in that direction for all kinds of reasons, but mainly because they find their little catalogs of terms and definitions hypnotically compelling. Of course, I see these things around me. Of course, I know the humans call them trees. But I do not presume they are trees. They are certainly not some tag of 4 letters, an interestingly formed tag, by the way, but I'll leave that as a secret. T-R-E-E, yeah, it's almost silly, the structure of our spelled word. So insight, we're not here to throw stuff away, we're not trying to figure out what is the case. And when we become concerned with what is the case, and there are some, layers of our human experience where this matters. Do I have my shoes on the wrong feet? Right. Unfortunately, that metaphor is almost explicitly perfect for what we've done with knowledge, because there's something beyond knowledge, and insight is beyond knowledge. Insight is like a substance that partly dissolves the structure of our habits so that new perspectives, understandings, abilities arise where previously we had perhaps 3. Chop down the tree, appreciate the tree, water the tree. So insight isn't concerned with what is the case. And when we become so fascinated with whether something is, quote, true or not, and that becomes the arbiter of our value system, our intelligence is offline. We have collapsed 10 manifolds of possibilities to a single value system. Is it true that that's a tree? Well, it's true in English, but is it true with a capital T? No, whatever that thing might be or represent or both. And it's more than just a distinct object. In fact, it's mostly not a distinct object. It's mostly an expression of history, time, space, biology, the sun, the moon, the earth, the living place it arises in. It's got all of these dimensions of identity that are easily dismissed by thinking of it as a separate thing. So there are situations in which factfulness is useful. Generalizations about facts, particularly about humans and animals, are dangerous. They're sort of the opposite of a dangerous question. They're projecting specific probabilities over a cohort, like selling life insurance, for example. Those are dangerous because they mislead us about the nature of identity itself, and they also mislead us by causing us to clumsily collapse a manifold of 50 different things, minimum, to 3, and then presume that we've succeeded in understanding what we're looking at. It's like the opposite of insight. Useful in some situations, but also lethally blinding. Often when you hear people use the word we need to, have an actual election in this country. Right? But that we doesn't exist. It's a putative we. It's a presumptive we who live in the United States and call ourselves Americans. But that's more of a linguistic category than an actual union. There's no actual union there. It's a representational union. And we can easily confuse those with what is actually going on and become extremely confused. The hope of insight now becomes a distant, pipe dream. So insight isn't concerned, it's not as concerned with facts, though it can utilize them and project some. It's concerned with perspective. It's concerned with finding a more useful perspective than the ones you've tried before. And really, the most dangerous question is the question that causes insight, if we are willing to sustain it in thought, concern, consciousness, purpose for a few moments. Our catalogs and lexicons are very compelling. They seem to be able to encompass most of our waking world experience, however clumsily. I can say the name of anything I can point at, with few exceptions. But when I say the name, I become very confused. And I am no longer seeing with insight, I am seeing through the lenses of knowledge. And strangely, here's a really dangerous question. Is most of what we call knowledge a sophisticated game of producing lies so compelling that we forget insight altogether and grip the lie with the hand of our mind, pronounce it, declare it, argue over it, fight, kill, die over it, wipe the world out, whatever. Everything the humans as a species are generally doing. Evening.
How you doing?
Nice to see you. Now there are different kinds of knowledge. For example, the knowledge that allows me to proprioceptively engage my body in movement, as I'm doing right now on my walk. That's not the kind of knowledge I'm talking about. And in fact, that form of knowledge is rich with insight because it's physical and it's biological. There is endless insight in merely paying attention to the body. But I'm not really paying attention. I know how to walk by habit. And it requires, it's a little bit like driving a car, but slower, right? I got to be present, or I'll step on things, stumble over things, whatever, make mistakes. But that's not the knowledge I mean. The knowledge I mean is the representational kind. The kind where we use tokens in language to refer to things being situations, actions, phenomena, behavior, nouns and verbs, and so on. Adjectives. I say, for example, the garbage can I see is brown. It is a true statement in language. But it's only true with human eyes. With other eyes, it could be other colors, and who knows what color it actually is. See the problem with what is the case? If I go after what is the case about the color of the garbage can, I have to throw everything away and try and produce a one-object universe, and then try to find the most primordial quality according to my lexicon that I have to work with, or my capacity for insight. Maybe both. Usually most people are trapped in the lexicon. Evening. So we just keep producing the derivatives that the inhibitions of our lexicons demand of us. And those are but the tiniest portion of what we're capable of, even with representational thought, even with representational language, lexicons, catalogs, identity trees, the structures that underlie our minds, or at least our thinking minds. No, our capacity for insight is probably infinite. Our general experience of it is uncommon for most of us. Now, some of us read, or we're curious. We seek out insight, knowledge, understanding. Perhaps we watch podcasts with people who can educate our minds. I do. I love that. It's very nourishing to me. But even we who pursue insight live in a milieu. And the milieu, it's quite difficult to hold the membrane, right? Especially today with electronic media. It's very difficult to hold the membrane, and our minds are not merely our own. They participate in networks of minds. There are networks of human minds even if you don't have an internet. There were networks of minds before we had machines. And so whatever's going on in the network leaks through to us, and we have little or no language to try to understand it with, or cope with it, or help each other cope with it. I'm hopeful that in these conversations, we can begin to develop some that would allow us, maybe even encourage us or empower us to explore, these features of our humanity. One of the most dangerous questions is simply this: do human minds form networks of a form we've not considered? Right? We consider the physical network, transmission of language, cultural artifacts, traditions, behaviors, so on. Right? Everything's very contagious in the humans. But what I'm proposing is that there's a primordial network that is decidedly not merely physical, that doesn't require two people to meet or know each other in order to transmit intelligence between them. This is what I am supposing. This is a very dangerous question, because if it were true, everything we ever thought would be wrong. Right? Mathematics comes from The discoveries of mathematics are generated in the network, and they localize in someone like Einstein from this perspective, which I think is insightful. Memes spread non-electronically. Thrisps, which are aggressively reproductive ideas, ideologies, and perspectives, also behaviors and technologies. They propagate wildly in the human network, and they certainly propagate in the physical dimension. Right? These cars I'm looking at are perfect examples of them. And so too the newscast I see on television. Right? It's basically pure thrisp. No insight, structured lying, highly structured lying. Almost the sign of something we may want to seek out to understand, right? It's almost like a crime scene. Yeah. And there's all these fascinating little clues in the behavior and history of the humans that have to do with the nature of the network and what happens when problems arise in it. When I began this recording, the reason I thought of the most dangerous question was because I'd been listening to an Air Force soldier who was one of the witnesses at the incident at Rendlesham Air Base in, I think, Suffolk, circa like 1982. May have the year wrong on that one. And what took place there is something we don't know. And in this case, it's not so much a matter of knowing what it was, because whatever it was probably doesn't fit in our world image at all. Rather, in this case, it had more to do with knowing what it wasn't. Because what it wasn't is anything we have authoritative knowledge about or placeholders for in language. It was a non-ordinary event if the world images that our lexicons prescribe to us is real or trustworthy. So in a sense, it was an event that would destroy the foundations of our lexicons. And anything that does that destroys the foundations of identity. We literally don't, in such a case, know what to be in relation to something that we truly don't understand. Now, the problem in Rendlesham isn't actually a monumental anomaly from outside human lexicons. We can know, even without insight, fairly simple things. These beings appear to be using something resembling a highly advanced technology, or array of them, and they are not human. It's not even entirely clear that they're simply physical. What the Air Force soldier reported seeing was not something that fits in our lexicons at all. from one perspective. From another perspective, it fits in our lexicons if we're willing to include in our lexicons a feature that we mostly don't, which is non-human intelligences that we ourselves can conceivably interact with and may have some relationship to. Lost part of my recording there, so I'm going to try to recover it. All right. So the humans, when we use this word intelligence, we can mean many different things. And if we're careful, we can use it adeptly. But when we think of the intelligence of our species in a general way, which is a problem, because at the species level, we are anything but intelligent. So usually what we mean is representationally intelligent, capable of forming conceptual maps and physical objects that represent advances, quote unquote, the maps gave us in producing devastation, mostly. But the devastation is really compelling and looks like houses and cars and soybean fields in what used to be the Amazon and so forth. So what we usually mean when we use this word intelligent to speak of our species, this is what we mean. We mean representationally intelligent. But all of the other organisms around us are profoundly, astonishingly intelligent, but the domain of their intelligence is physical, relational, and probably for other things we don't even have language for. That if we were forced to, we might just say it's spiritual. And we probably wouldn't be far from the mark, but what we mean by that is backwards, because most likely all the intelligences are one intelligence first and only appear as distinct, so they never defect from relation. There are no omnicidal biological intelligences on Earth that just kill everything they touch, which ours is. So that doesn't actually look intelligent, does it? I would argue our species is not intelligent really at all, except in the sense of being able to make really compelling maps, models, concepts, mathematics, and so forth, that allow us to produce technologies we are vastly too ignorant to enact with any degree of safety or wisdom or insight. So again, we don't look intelligent. Even though a given human being may be a profusion of intelligences, many of which are quite insightful and don't go around killing everything, and so forth. So you can find the intelligence in our bodies, you can find it in the potentials of our minds, but mostly what you find in our societies is something largely resembling the opposite. And there's, arguments against this. It was a lot worse 4,000 years ago. Okay, granted, maybe, in many places. But what worse means is different. Like, it can't actually be a lot worse unless those people had the capacity to end the planet, which our people do have. And this is exactly the kind of people you don't want having that ability. So what I'm trying to get at is when humans think of intelligences, they usually think about ours. They don't think about the biorelational intelligences. We're not trained to do that. And even if we're introduced to the topic, it's a very preschool conversation about the mechanics of it, right? The mechanical features of nature. Because I guess that's what we're hoping to manipulate and create new disasters by doing so. So we can have a placeholder in our lexicons. Right? If time-space is intelligence, or what if it's something that is to intelligence what stars are to light? What if time-space produces intelligence almost as a side effect of everything else it is and is doing and being, who it is being, right? We never think about this question. Even in the religions, some people might look to the sky and see the being that dwells in unity, right? They might see that as its body, but most people don't. Very few people do, at least comparatively. So if we have the placeholder non-human intelligences, it won't obliterate our lexicons overtly. Really what we have is a long history of the military in the United States, particularly, defaming, lying about, psyoping the people, creating, introducing hoaxes on purpose, persecuting people, prosecuting people, silencing people about this topic. And it's not just the United States by a long shot. Every country, with very few exceptions, that has any interest in the phenomena, has the same policy. Why? There's the sound of intelligence. Almost as if the bird is answering. The big secret isn't that we're not alone. Wow. Squashes. And one of the most dangerous questions is, what is it we see in the sky when we encounter what we refer to as UFOs, when people encounter what appears to be beings from craft? And when these things happen, there are very bizarre side effects, right? It's time changes, identity goes haywire, you can't tell what anything is. Your mind itself is in some kind of a state that's half hypnotic and half in awe and half in terror. 3 halves, I know. But humans are capable of that kind of confusion. So it's certainly not anything from our lexicons. And normally when we think about aliens or whatever, we think about people in spaceships from other planets. And the primary fear there is the fear of our own insanity magnified in a highly technological species. It's hard for humans, qua humans, to imagine that there might be actually intelligent others in time-space. And some of them might not be merely physical or merely biological. Like whatever some percentage of the phenomenon represents, some slice of the pie, where we're actually talking about things that look like vehicles doing stuff, sometimes with humans, sometimes to humans. We don't know what it is. But we're also unwilling to admit, not that we don't know, but that there's no reason to suspect that we've ever been alone here. We've just been told that over and over again. And we've been lied to about it over and over again. And so, people will have plebeian questions like, well, why don't they just come and show up and introduce themselves? Well, they probably have, but not to us. Not to the people themselves, to groups of humans, to families, to schoolyards, to Air Force bases. Right? But those questions are kind of silly for a lot of different reasons. One of the most dangerous questions we can ask is, what if we're not merely human? What if what if we're mostly transcendent and we're trapped in this tiny little corner of our nature and our intelligence by ideas so ridiculous and yet so compelling that they can capture thousands of years of human civilization? Where do those come from? Why are we vulnerable that way? These are dangerous questions. The best kind of dangerous questions. But if we're mostly not human, and I will argue that this is completely true, in this case I'm actually saying something that I am promoting to the status of a fact. Right? I'm collapsing the manifold. If we only think of the earth, and this is how humans usually think, they only think of the earth. They think the earth is alone, it's the only one, it's our one. Everything that's important is happening here. There's probably nothing going on out there in time-space, which is completely nonsensical. But if we only think of the earth, most of us is organism. An organism is all the organisms. It's not one. So first, even if we just have no transcendental thoughts, no spiritual thoughts, no thoughts about origin, and we think, oh, it's just a local mechanical accident that there's life on this world, 99% of us is organism. 75% of us is animal. Those aren't human. Those are superpositions over our humanity, and they are vast, open superpositions. Then we are animal, then we are human, then we are cognitively human. So that little cognitive part is probably less than 1% of what we are. But most of us will be pretty much trapped in there most of the time while we're awake. Why? There's a dangerous question. So why would the governments be so motivated to lie and hide things and be effectively duplicitous with the humans in general? Well, contact with or recovery of anything resembling a technology from non-human intelligences would literally invent a new species of human. There would be a speciation event going on right now. There are humans in possession of technology from the monumentally distant future of mankind. Perhaps 10,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 10 million years ahead of us, if we're measuring in that way, where time is a linear and there's an ahead of us. But effectively, anyone in possession of knowledge, devices, models, concepts, math, physics, devices, materials, and bodies. Those people would represent a new species of human. This is a form of power modern humans have never had. There's nothing more potent or authoritatively dominating than being the branch of the government that might be, for example, in possession of downed alien vehicles. And vehicle is probably the wrong word for them, but I'm just using the familiar pointer. So, any faction in possession of that technology, for the military, it's pure asymmetric advantage. It's the most important thing in the universe. It's more important than governments, humans, ecologies, futures, money, politics, religion, it's the most important thing. So one of the most dangerous questions we can ask is, or I should say are, some of the most dangerous questions we can ask orbit this phenomena. Why are they lying? And they are lying. They have been lying straight up, no chaser, for many decades. Now, of course, if there are actually intelligent non-human others capable of relating in some way directly with us, and I will argue that there certainly are, and that the evidence is all around us in biology. These are non-human intelligences. They are contactable by human minds, human hearts, human passions, human wonder, human awe, human curiosity. The tree, the housefly, the skunk, the raccoon, the whale, the dolphin, the octopus, the wasp, the blue jay, the hawk, the owl, the dove, the seagull. These are intelligences and they are contactable. We've been told they aren't. We've been told all kinds of nonsense that mostly has to do with lying like crazy in language. Good evening. Sorry, I'm just going past some basketball stuff going on here. Our lexicons have roots, and one of them is universe. In fact, that's sort of the supercontainer or most primordial root. Whatever we think the universe is and contains actually tells us what to be, right? It's almost like there's a transcription code in the concept universe. We transcribe it and it tells us what we are. You know, we are human beings on Earth circa 2023, and language users and so forth, animals. So if we were to encounter sky beings or time beings or sky time beings or, you know, multi-dimensional beings or beings who compose bodies, inhabit them with consciousness, go on missions, dissolve those bodies, go back to straight consciousness or transcendence in this case, then that changes every game. And all of the thoughts we ever had about the identity of anything will be drawn into question by the open admission, yes, this is going on. It's 40 different things. We've looked at these 20 of them. We've learned some things about it. You know, we have craft, we have bodies, we have technologies, we have materials, and we probably have intelligence, right? Conceptual maps and models, explanations of phenomena that are literally from the future of our species. You know, you can see if you just walk into a room in your house where you have television screens and computers, right? You just look around. You got various objects there, right? Forks and knives and dishes and plates and chairs and furnishings and so forth. And some of those things are fairly advanced, but compared to the television or your smartphone, you're literally, part of the room is literally in the future, right? And that part changes time. The main function of those devices is to change temporalities, to make different modes of time, to shorten time, to mimic time, to replace time, to get rid of time, to speed up time, to slow down time. Oven speeds it up. The refrigerator slows it down. Guns cause it to collapse. Lifelines go to zero due to bullets. So there are factions of humans that clearly have been in possession of probably at least partly non-ordinary objects, vehicles, bodies, for many years and have studied them. It's a different species. There will be a speciation event around that one thing, whether or not it happens today or in 10 years or 30. And those people are the wrong people to be in contact with whatever might be out there. Whatever certainly is out there is a better way of saying it. There aren't like hundreds of thousands of written reports about phenomena that doesn't exist. So the old lie of there's no there, there's nothing to see, go home, that lie is over with. Many people may continue to believe it. I don't think it will serve them very well. But yeah, that lie is over with. We've been encountering advanced intelligences of some form or forms probably for thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. Most likely, we've never been alone. We just don't know how to knock on the door. We don't remember how to knock on the door. And maybe we're starting to remember now. But the sky, it isn't any of the things we think it is. And what it is so transcendent to our thinking that if we could get just the slightest degree of insight, everything we know and can do, all that we can be or become, and all that we have been will transform. And what I'm trying to say is the door to liberty from the traps that we face it's the hilarious problem. We're made of the door and we keep looking for it outside ourselves. We are so much more than merely human. And it doesn't mean we're gods or, hello, hi, yes, yeah. We're made of what we're looking for, but our language and concept maps say denigrating things about it. It's crazy to think that way. Yeah, it's true, physical reality is very compelling. But whatever the Air Force soldiers saw was not a macro level phenomenon. Right? Again, time changes, sound changes, light changes, force changes, everything changes. And it clearly represents the intrusion of something transcendental to the macro world. I'm not saying it's quantum physics, I'm not saying it's stringy. I'm saying it's not merely macro, if anything is. It's not classical physics. It's not classical biology. It's something beyond our categories. And probably it's something from outside linear time. We don't have a lot of language about that, not too much at all. Maybe we have gods, aliens, spirits, and demons, angels, jinn, genies. And most of the humans think, oh, those are just superstitious ideas. I've never encountered one. There's no such thing. Well, good luck. You better have something that leads to the outer space of identity. Otherwise, your lexicon will strangle your intelligence down to something that it should never collapse into, except maybe to hammer a nail. And hopefully never to shoot a gun. Some of the most dangerous questions are questions about the ways in which we're not merely human. And these are some of the most important questions to chase and remember, recover the answers to in a kind of anamnesis, right? A recollective flow of memory and insight and perspective that I would argue our minds were born in, and most of us, we were slave-collared shortly after birth with representational cognition, which I don't want to get rid of and is very useful. Unfortunately, the implementations that prevail among groups of humans are catastrophically, lethally stupidifying. Whatever we are, it was never merely human. We are modes of time-space. Time-space makes these little things called humans of itself, and then within time-space, it acquires those qualities, right? One could say, if there are humans on Earth, time-space is humany. And it's the same is true of every organism I see, this ivy, the wasp, the beetle. Each of them, they are modes of time-space. So they are not merely insects. They are not merely plants. They are not merely biologies. There's a ladder, and for some reason, there's a ladder that goes from origin to identity, and for some reason the humans snip that ladder off at what's mechanically provable. What a bizarre thing to do. Why would that happen? One answer is, it may be that our minds originally developed in constant contact with non-human intelligences. All day, every day, all humans had companions in the sky, so to speak, that taught them that, in a way, parented their intelligence. And in this model that I like to play with, at some point there was either some kind of an accident, there was some kind of a war, or there was some kind of a catastrophe. Maybe all three, right? And two other things I haven't included here yet. And effectively the signal went away. Right. The ambient signal, the sort of Wi-Fi of time-space, disappeared over a very short period of time for reasons we could pursue and remember, but for now must primarily speculate on. Good evening. The most dangerous questions are questions that would cause us to insightfully transform our relationship with concepts, particularly ideas of identity. That's where the primary problems seem to gather together and form a tangled mess. But please be assured, most of you isn't human, never was, never will be. I don't know what all the features of it are, but most of you isn't local to this body. Most of you isn't local to this time. You're not merely a biology. You're not merely an organism, an animal, or a human being. Good evening. I would love to hear your feedback about these ideas, and particularly your questions. And it would be really exciting if you would post in the comments some of your candidates for the most dangerous question. I would really enjoy that. So grateful to have had this time together this evening, and I look forward to learning to see better together somehow, sometime, very soon. Wise ways and all blessings to you. Bye-bye for now.